Merry Christmas.
Same to you, honey.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
Yeah, exactly.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy 2021.
Yes. Happy,
No,
hopeful.
Here we go.
Happy, healthy, hopeful.
Okay.
So I think
Happy holidays, everyone.
Merry Christmas
Yeah,
from Canada.
Merry Christmas to all my friends. Love you all.
Yes, Merry Christmas. A lot of people joined.
A lot of people do now.
Hi, Pam. Bravo, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you. So are we ready to start? Should I play a little more? Oh, there we go.
The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. For unto us a child is born. Welcome. Welcome to Christmas Eve services at First Parish Church of Groton, Massachusetts. Welcome to the community we create together on Christmas Eve every year. As we listen again to that ancient story about how love gets born into this world and how love changes everything. Our service tonight is wildly different than we could have imagined a year ago. And yet our service tonight is also the same. It is the same because we have learned that the love which holds our congregation together transcends all screens, all walls, all distances. If you are exhausted, may this hour be a time of rest. If you are worried or afraid, may the music calm you and bring you courage. If you are sad or grieving, may the warmth and strength of this community hold you for a little while and give you comfort. We gather tonight to light candles in the darkness. These candles are for you. They are for all who long for warmth and light and healing. And they are for all who seek shelter anywhere in the world, and for all who yearn for peace. So welcome one and all. I'm Reverend Elia Kemmler. I'm minister of First Parish Church of Groton. If you are attending services with us for the first time tonight, we are so glad you found us. Please say hello in the chat. And members of our Welcoming All group are here to welcome you, whether you are with us on Zoom or on YouTube Live. There are many different ways to get or stay connected to our community during this time. Just email or message us, welcome@uugroton.org for more information. welcome@uugroton.org. So I have just a couple of announcements before we begin tonight. First, thanks to all who are participating in tonight's service, to Sean McCann, our Director of Music Ministries, to Marissa Benson, our Youth and Young Adult Program Coordinator, to Lee Kinvey, our Intern Minister, and to readers Pamela Warden and Charles Fouché. We are collecting much needed donations for the church's gas and grocery card ministry. The need for cards has doubled since the pandemic began. We're spending about $900 a month now on cards. We don't turn anyone away who asks for help, and we hope that we never have to. So I ask you, if you are able, to go over to the church's webpage, www.uugroton.org, and make a donation there. We will be back on YouTube Live for services on Sunday at 10 a.m., and I hope that you will join me there. Finally, hopefully you brought a candle to your screen tonight, and if not, you may want to go find one during the opening carol. So let's sing now together, "O come all ye faithful." The words for the carol and everything that we sing tonight will be in the chat. So we'll sing, "O come all ye faithful."
Sean, can you unmute?
That would help, wouldn't it? Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Lee Kinvey. I'm going to be your intern minister, and I'm tickled pink about that. I'm here to do tech support tonight in part. So let me just say that the most important thing is that you have the power to switch between speaker view and gallery view. So if at any point you'd like to see everybody, there are a couple times when we'll tell you this would be a good gallery view time. But if you're on a laptop, you can go to the usually upper right-hand corner, and there's a little toggle button there that you can switch between gallery and speaker. We'll be doing something called spotlighting, which puts whoever's speaking in front. If you want to just leave it at that, that's great. Otherwise, you have that option to go back and forth. Hopefully everybody can find where the chat is. Feel free to send a message to me directly if you need help locating anything. That's what my tech support self is here to do. We're going to ask people to remain muted today unless you have a speaking role, so that Zoom doesn't have that thing that it does with cutting off sound. One final thing as a fun thing, if you're in gallery view and you can sort of have all the boxes, but you could also grab the boxes and move them around. So if there's a cute toddler dancing or something, you could put it at the top of your screen and watch the toddler. So those are the things that I have to tell you about tech. And if you need any help, you can find me, message me directly under tech support. I think that's what my name is tonight. I also am going to offer our opening words. They're adapted from our colleague, Reverend Jason Cook. Some Christmas Eve, not very long ago, someone stumbled into a church. Out of the darkness, out of the places of sorrow and brokenness and fear we all experience. Somewhere along the way, in this thing called life, someone stumbled into a church on Christmas Eve, but not this Christmas Eve. That someone who might have been you or me found their way into a sanctuary, aptly named, for sanctuary is what they found, but not this Christmas Eve. That someone took a seat and sat in the glow of the people that surrounded them. People whose hearts are not always full, but they were overflowing that night as they embraced one another and eyes met and strangers became friends. But not this Christmas Eve. This Christmas Eve is different. The seekers in that sanctuary scattered to separate places, bandaging wounds from a year beyond what we could have known or believed possible. So there will be no sanctuary, not this Christmas Eve, but there will be sanctuary. There will be no loving embrace from strangers, not this Christmas Eve, but there will be love. There will be no shared candlelit room except here in this Zoom room, but there will be light and warmth and possibility all the same. So welcome. Welcome to Christmas, the way we can do Christmas Eve this year.
So now we will light the chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, which proclaims the beautiful truth of the worth and dignity of every person. We welcome this night the birth of a child who became one of the world's great teachers of peace and of a radical turn things upside down love, which included everyone, and insisted that those who are overlooked and unwanted are precious and beautiful. We welcome this night the birth of hope, shining in each child who comes into the world, every child born on every night, in every hour, and in every place on this planet. And tonight we also light 4 candles on our Advent wreath, The candles are white instead of purple and pink because the Advent time ends with the birth of Jesus. Our time of waiting is not over, of course. We wait for many things still. We wait for an end to this pandemic. We wait for an end to suffering. We wait for an end to injustice. There is room for sadness here tonight, and the aching for things to be different. We can hold it here together, and maybe that will help it feel a little bit lighter. But we also celebrate tonight. We celebrate hope and all the reasons we have for hope. We celebrate the passing of the longest night of winter and the slow return of light. We celebrate the creation of the vaccine, and that even today, people were vaccinated. We celebrate kindness and generosity and the beginning of a new year. The poet Mark Nepo writes, "Aspire to stay tender. The softness of light is everywhere." So let us kindle light in the darkness. Natalie and Toby are going to help light the chalice and the Advent wreath tonight. Okay. And I'm going to light the candles on the Advent wreath, and then I'll show them to you. We light our chalice and Advent wreath candles tonight for hope and for tenderness, and to help us remember that the softness of light is everywhere, including inside of each one of us. So our next carol is In the Bleak Midwinter. Lee will lead us in singing, and the words are in the chat so that we can sing along.
In 1872, the great English poet Christina Rossetti wrote In the Bleak Midwinter, and in 1906, the great English composer Gustav Holst set it to music. What has always struck me about this poem is how personal it is. You know, angels and archangels may have thronged the air, but this is about Mary kissing her child. And I think anyone who cares for children or for vulnerable adults understands that. And then there's the verse about what can I give him? Give my heart. What more can any of us give but our hearts? So I'm going to invite you as you sing to reflect on how and to what and to whom we want to give our hearts this season. In the Bleak Midwinter. In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter long ago. Christ a homeless stranger, so the Gospels say, cradled in a manger and a bed of hay. In the bleak midwinter, stable place sufficed. Mary and her baby, Jesus Christ. Oh, what can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what can I give him? Give my heart. Once more mother and child weave their magic spell, touching hearts with wonder words can never tell. In the bleak midwinter, in this world of pain, where our hearts are open, love is born again. Where our hearts are open, love is born again.
So now it is time for a story. This story is called Home by Another Way, A Christmas Story by Barbara Brown Taylor. I like this one a lot. I hope you do too. Once upon a time, there were 3 very wise men who were all sitting in their own countries, minding their own business, when a bright star lodged in the right eye of each one of them. The star was so bright that none of them could tell whether it was burning in the sky or in their own imaginations. But they were wise enough to know that it didn't matter all that much. The point was, something beyond them was calling them, and it was a tug they had been waiting for all their lives. Each in his own country had tried books and magic and astrology. One had lived on nothing but dried herbs in boiling water. Another had spent his entire fortune learning how to read and write in an ancient language. The third had learned to walk on hot coals, though it did nothing for him beyond the great sense of relief he felt at the end. Despite their best efforts, all 3 of them still felt that something was missing. They were all glad for a reason to get out of town, which was clearly where the star was calling them out, away from everything they had known. And so they set out one by one, each one believing that he was the only one with the star in his eye, until they all ran into each other on their way to the city called Jerusalem. From a distance, each one thought the other was a mirage at first, a twinkling reflection made of vapor and heat. But as they drew nearer to each other, they saw the star they had in common, like a tattoo or a secret handshake, something that made them brothers before they had even spoken. They all believed the star was leading them to Jerusalem. Now, this made perfect sense because they had every reason to believe that they were on their way to meet a king. They had no trouble gaining entrance to the palace. They looked rich, and that was enough to get them a royal audience. But the king they met was something of a disappointment. He was lumpy, he was rumpled, and he had terrible breath. His skin was a funny orange color and sickly. The guards on either side of him shook in fear of their king so much that their spears rattled against their shields. Without even comparing notes, the wise men knew this was not the person they were looking for. Do you know of any other kings in the general area? They asked him. He had been picking his fingernails until then, letting them know just how bored he was. But their question got his attention. He looked right at them for the first time, and that was when he saw the star in each of their eyes, and his own eyes grew perfectly round like the eyes of a snake. The king asked the wise men if they would please excuse him for just a moment. Then he stepped into his private office to confer with his advisors. They whipped out their old reference books, which smelled like mold, and told the king what he wanted to know. Yes, they said there was something in the book about a new ruler for Israel, but nothing to get excited about, nothing to worry about. It was short. It had been there for a long time. It was unlikely that the men in the other room had anything to do with it. But sure, why not? Send them to Bethlehem to check it out. Save the king a little money instead of doing his own research. So that is what the king did. He gargled, he combed his hair, and he went back to tell the wise men they should go to Bethlehem at once with his blessing, on one condition, that they come back and tell him who it was so that he could send the new king flowers. His breath smelled like pine sol when he said it, which made the wise men feel sick. They knew something wasn't right, but once they were back out in the night air, they could see that star in the sky again, and it set their minds at rest. They followed it right to the doorway of a one-room house in a village called Bethlehem. It was a perfectly nice place, small, but well-built, but not the kind of place where they had expected to find a king. A dog was sniffing the woodpile under the eaves in the hope of finding a mouse. Someone was practicing the lute next door, going over the same notes over and over again. The smell of dinner was still in the air, wheat cakes cooked on a griddle and lentils with lots of garlic and rice. There's the house. Do you see the star shining over it? The place looked so simple, They would never have chosen it themselves, but since the star had chosen it for them, they knocked. And when the door opened, the couple standing behind it almost died of fright. Not that the wise men noticed. With their arms full of gifts, they crowded into the small space, bumping their turbans on the rafters and snagging their robes on the rough furniture. All they could see was the baby, who was not afraid, and whose right eye shone with the same star they had seen before they ever left home. It was him, whoever he was. They didn't have a clue, but they knew what to do. They got on their knees and bowed their heads. Then they gave him the things they had brought for him, gold and frankincense and myrrh, which are expensive, good-smelling things, all the wrong stuff they could see now, things he had no use for. They should have brought him goat's milk and a warm blanket and something shiny to hang above his crib, but how could they have guessed? The child's parents were kind. They thanked the strangers for their fancy gifts and held them up for the baby to see. And then, to the wise men's complete surprise, the child's mother scooped him up and handed him around so that each one of them held that sweet baby. And when they were finished admiring him, she took her baby back, nursed him to sleep, and put him to bed. And before the light coming through the window of the house had entirely gone out, the wise men fell fast asleep right where they sat. In the morning, when they woke up, the wise men could not find their stars anywhere. They searched each other's eyes, but the stars were gone. Frantically, they looked in all the corners and under the chairs, and the baby's mother even shook out his blankets, but still no stars. But the wise men said, "Never mind. We don't need them anymore." They had found what they were looking for, something they could not lose. And as much as they hated to, they said they had better be on their way. They would not be going back through Jerusalem, though, they said. All three of them had had the same identical dream, warning them to steer clear of this city. If anyone in Jerusalem knew anything at all, they would be here instead of there. And besides, none of the wise men's maps worked anymore. They would have to find a new way home. So they picked up their bags, which were lighter than before, and then they lined up in front of the baby to thank him for the gifts he had given them. "What in the world are you talking about?" the baby's mother said, laughing. "For the scent and weight and skin of a baby," said the first. "For this home and the love here," said the second. "For a really great story," said the third. Then the wise men walked outside. They stretched. They got on their camels after kissing that baby goodbye, and they went home by another way. The end. So Cindy Premru and Sean McCann have created a beautiful Christmas present for all of us tonight, made of photographs and music, and we will show you that now.
Just don't talk.
So we would like to invite you to listen to the story of the birth of Jesus as told in the Gospels of Luke and Matthew. This is Mark Bellatini's adaptation of the Gospels with words by Libby Stoddard.
It came to pass that Caesar Augustus declared a universal census for taxing purposes. This was the first one of its kind, the one taken while Quirinius was prefect over all of Syria. Travelers had to return to their own hometowns in order to be properly counted. So Joseph left Galilee, the city of Nazareth to be exact, and traveled south to the region of Judea, to his birthplace in Bethlehem. With him was Mary, his fiancée, who was due to give birth at any moment. Thus it was that while they were in Bethlehem, Mary delivered her firstborn child. She wrapped him up tight, according to custom, and they had to use the manger, the cattle feeder, for the baby's first crib, since they could find no better privacy in the place where they were staying.
And it came to pass in those days, as it is always coming to pass on every ordinary day, in every ordinary place, that a child should be born. And this child would be called 1,000 beautiful names. Every word there is for gladness. Every word there is for love. Every word there is for peace.
Nearby, shepherds were keeping watch over their flocks by night, and suddenly an angel came to them, and a majestic light shone all around them. They were terrified. But the divine messenger said to them, "Don't be afraid. Listen, I have good news for you. In Bethlehem, a child has been born for you, a healer who has been chosen by God to bring love into the world. And this is how you will recognize him. You will discover a newborn baby, all wrapped up tight and lying in a cattle feeder."
And suddenly, the messenger was surrounded with what appeared to be a whole choir in the sky, singing these words: "The true glory of God is peace among all the peoples of the earth."
Then the choir vanished, and the shepherds, amazed, hurried to Bethlehem. There they found Mary and Joseph and the baby asleep in a cattle feeder, just as they were told.
For why are we born but to remind each other what hope looks like, what hope feels like when you hold it in your hands and cradle it, whispering the quietest and bravest lullabies. For why are we born but to awaken to a winter morning, to look again upon the winter landscape, to stand upon this humble, holy ground and know that we are blessed.
I'm going to read "Blessed Are You Who Bear the Light" by Jan Richardson. Blessed are you who bear the light in unbearable times, who testify to its endurance amidst the unendurable, who bear witness to its persistence when everything seems in shadow and grief. Blessed are you in whom the light lives, in whom the brightness blazes, your heart a chapel, an altar where the deepest night can be seen, the fire that shines forth in the unaccountable faith. in stubborn hope, in love that illuminates every broken thing that it finds.
So last Christmas Eve, I told you a story that I realize now was a year too soon to tell. But we didn't know what was coming. How could we have known the year that was ahead of us? How could we have known about the hardship that was to come for so many? The courage that would be required to keep going to work in hospitals and grocery stores. The creativity and dedication of teachers and parents. How could we have known about virtual schooling and hybrid schooling and red zones and rapid testing? I barely knew what Zoom was a year ago. So I didn't know that the story I told last Christmas Eve was really meant for tonight. But when I remembered it, I knew it was. At first, this might not sound like a Christmas story at all because it is about really hard things. But it's definitely a Christmas story, especially for the year 2020. Auburn Sandstrom, whose story this is, tells it on Moth Radio Hour, and this is a slightly condensed version of her words. The year was 1992, Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm curled up on a dirty carpet in a chaotic apartment in horrible withdrawal from a drug I have been addicted to for several years. In my hand, I have a ragged little piece of paper, and I'm unfolding it and folding it and unfolding it. There's a phone number written on the paper. Auburn then describes how she felt like she had been having one continuous anxiety attack for the last 5 years, and she'd never been in a more desperate place. She wanted more than anything to run away and just keep on running, but she couldn't, because behind her, asleep, was her baby boy. She was 29 years old, and she was not, as she put it, going to be receiving the Mother of the Year award. She was pretty much failing at life, despite being raised in relative privilege and comfort and having had an excellent education. But she had come to the faulty conclusion that the only way to deal with the privilege and comfort she had received was to destroy it, instead of using it to help change the world or become someone she felt proud of. Auburn was on probation. Her husband was on parole. She was emaciated and covered in bruises. And on the night of this story, underneath the sickness of withdrawal and the terrible anxiety, was the sure knowledge that if she kept going in this direction, she was going to lose the most precious thing she had ever had in her life: her child, sleeping peacefully, her beloved son. She felt so desperate that she was willing to punch the numbers into the phone. Her mother had sent her the phone number in the mail, despite the fact that Auburn hadn't really been in touch with anyone in her family for years. In the note with the number, her mother said it was for a Christian counseling hotline. And maybe Auburn would talk to a hotline counselor since she wouldn't talk to anybody else. Auburn wasn't remotely interested in religion, but she dialed. She heard someone pick up the phone, and a man on the other end said hello. And she said, "Hi, I got this number from my mother. Do you think you could maybe talk to me?" And she told how you could hear the man shuffling around. It sounded like he was maybe getting out of bed and turning off a radio or a TV, which had been playing in the background. Auburn says she just felt him become very, very present on the other end of the phone. And he said, "Yes, tell me what's going on." Auburn says, "I hadn't told anybody, including myself, the truth for a long time. But I told him. I told him I wasn't feeling very good and that I was scared and that things had gotten kind of bad in my marriage. And before long, I started telling him other truths too. Like I might have a drug problem. No, I definitely have a drug problem. And I really love my husband, but he's hit me a few times. And there was that time he pushed the baby and me out in the cold and locked the door. But I still love him, so don't say anything bad about him. This man didn't judge me or tell me to do anything. He just sat with me and listened. And he had such a kindness and such a gentleness. He said, "Tell me more. That must have really hurt. That sounds so hard. I can't believe you made it through that." Auburn said, "I made that call at about 2 a.m. and this man stayed with me the whole night until the sun rose. And by the dawn, I was feeling a lot calmer. I was feeling like, I can probably do this day. I wouldn't have cared if the guy was a Hare Krishna or a Buddhist or whatever. It didn't matter to me what his faith was. I was just really grateful to him So I said, hey, I really appreciate what you have done for me tonight. Aren't you supposed to be telling me to read some Bible verses or something? Because that would be cool. I'll do it. And he laughed and he said, well, I'm glad talking to me helped you. That's all. And I asked, well, how long have you been a Christian hotline counselor? Because you're really good at it. And he said, well, to be honest, I was kind of trying to avoid that subject. I'll tell you, but will you promise not to hang up the phone? And I said I would stay on the phone. And he said, that number you called, wrong number. This isn't a Christian counseling hotline. I didn't hang up. We talked a while longer until the baby started waking up. I never learned his name. I never talked to him again. But I need to tell you that the next day I experienced something that I have heard called the peace that passes understanding. Because I had experienced that there was love in the universe. And that some of it was unconditional and that some of it was for me. I can't tell you that I got my life totally together that day, but that was the day it became possible. It also became possible for me to take that baby boy and raise him up into a young honors scholar athlete who graduated from Princeton University in 2013. Auburn Sandstrom went on to become a writer herself and a college writing instructor. And she ends her story with these words. This is what I know. In the deepest, darkest night of despair and anxiety, it only takes a pinhole of light, and all of grace can come in. It only takes a pinhole of light, and all of grace can come in. Tonight, we gather to celebrate the ancient and improbable story of a baby who grew up to bring such light into this world that we remember him still. Tonight we gather to light small candles in the darkness at the end of this hard, hard year, and to say that grace is real. There's still reason for hope, and the softness of light is everywhere. Not despite everything, but right alongside everything. The things we share tonight are fragile. They are tender things. Poems and songs and stories and flickers of light in the darkness. We can't hold on to any of them. But they matter because love always matters. And a pinhole of light is all it takes for grace to find its way. The story of that baby born a long time ago in Bethlehem is a story about grace finding its way, even in the most surprising circumstances. That story tells us that light comes into this world in the places we least expect. A baby born to a young mother and a carpenter father who had to flee into Egypt and become refugees in order to save that child from Herod's murderous intent. And the story tells us that the baby grew up to be a healer a teacher, a reformer who preached a message about compassionate, inclusive, and unlimited love, especially for the people who his society and culture, much like our own, did not value. The message that Jesus taught was so radical that it got him killed. But it was so radically beautiful that we are still trying to practice it. And at the heart of his message is this: there is love in the universe, and some of it is unconditional, and some of it is for us, for every one of us, no matter who we are. Grace is another word for this kind of love, for that compassion and generosity and wild kindness that come to us as a gift and most often seem to arrive when we are at our most vulnerable. Or maybe that is just when we can notice it better, when we can see it, when we can accept it, when we are broken open, as so many of us have been this past year. Grace comes to us as a gift, but grace also comes through us. There is no other way, I know, for it to get here. So we must be, we get to be the bearers of grace in this world. We get to be the stranger on the other end of the phone whose gentle, listening presence holds a desperate woman through the night until the dawn breaks through. We never know how our words, our small acts of compassion, even our kind silence, might change things for someone. But we know that love can change things. We know that love can change everything. It so often does, if we let it. And it only takes a pinhole of light. So in just a moment, I will ask all of you to light your candles and to turn down the light in your room. It needs to be dim so that we can see the candlelight. But make sure that you can see enough to get back to your computer safely and see the words of Silent Night. And then we'll sing Silent Night together, softly and gently. The words will be in the chat, and Sean and his family are going to lead us in singing. And after we sing the verses to Silent Night, we will hum one verse so softly and gently, as has become our tradition. And during that time of humming, that is when I invite those of you who are attending on Zoom to make sure that your camera is in gallery view so that we can see your light. So I invite everyone to make sure that you are in gallery view, and you'll find that in the upper right-hand corner if you haven't found it already. And make sure that you are on full screen as well. And when we are done humming, hold up your candlelight in the quiet so that we can see everybody's light shining. Please be careful. We don't want to set anything on fire this year. We don't want you to drip wax on your computer. We'll be in the candlelight together in quiet for a moment, and we will create something beautiful and holy. And then we will put out our candles all together. And so we gather on this tender, hopeful night to light candles in the darkness. Each one of us is a light, and we are strongest when we help each other, when we shine together, when we share light with those who don't have enough. And we do share our light, even here, even now. May this light give us strength and so much hope. So, Sean, will you lead us with your family in singing Silent Night? And don't forget to light your candle, turn down the light in your room, put yourself into gallery view and full screen while we hum that final verse. Here we go. So now we will extinguish these flames, but not the light of peace, the warmth of community, or the fire of love. These we carry in our hearts. Our closing hymn is Joy to the World. The words are in the chat, and let's stay in gallery view so we can see one another's faces while we sing Joy to the World. So I invite you all to stay for the postlude music. But for now, will you put one hand over your heart, and with the other, let's reach out to one another and know that we are connected. We are woven together by strong and sturdy threads of love. You go in peace, friends. You be a blessing to this world. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.